The mathematical universality of the 17 wallpaper groups, the fact that all possible 2D repeating patterns belong to one of exactly 17 symmetry categories, is one of mathematics' most beautiful results. It was proved in 1891 by the Russian mathematician Evgraf Fedorov. And yet, before Fedorov's proof, pattern designers across every culture had intuitively explored all 17 symmetry types. Islamic geometric artists had used all 17 by the 13th century. Yoruba Adaya designers work within these symmetries without knowing Fedorov's name. This is an example of how mathematical truth is embedded in human creative practice. The artists discovered the mathematical reality through making, centuries before mathematicians formalized it. Art and mathematics are not opposites, they are different paths to the same underlying structures. Traditional African pattern design is characterized by a sophistication that Western scholarship was slow to recognize. The geometric patterns of the Kuba Kingdom, present-day Democratic Republic of Congo, interlocking geometric designs of extraordinary mathematical complexity, were studied by mathematicians in the 20th century and found to include pattern symmetry types that European mathematicians had only recently formalized. Nigerian visual traditions, the uli art of Igbo women, the geometric patterns of northern Nigerian leatherwork and embroidery, the repeating motifs of Yoruba Adaya, all represent sophisticated engagements with mathematical regularity, balance, and variation that demonstrate advanced visual intelligence. When Nigerian students design patterns in fine art class, they are participating in a mathematical artistic tradition of 2,500 years. The indigo plant, Indigofera tinctoria, is central to West African textile culture in a way that has few parallels in world material culture. Indigo is unique among natural dyes in its chemistry. It is insoluble in water but becomes soluble when reduced, oxygen removed, in an alkaline dye vat. When the dyed cloth is lifted from the vat and exposed to air, the dye oxidizes and turns from yellow-green to deep blue, permanently bonding to the cloth fibers. This chemistry was understood intuitively by traditional dyers in Kano and in Abeokuta for centuries. They maintained the dye vats in specific conditions, sometimes using fermentation, ash, or urine to create the necessary reducing alkaline environment, without knowing the chemical explanation. Traditional Kano dyers maintain dye pits that have been in continuous operation for hundreds of years. The dye chemistry accumulated in the pit was itself a resource, grown more powerful over time. The tie-dye craze that swept through Western popular culture in the late 1960s and 1970s, associated with the hippie counterculture movement in the United States, was actually a rediscovery and commercialization of techniques that had existed in West Africa, India, and Japan for centuries. The irony was not lost on Nigerian observers. Techniques refined and practiced by Yoruba Adaya artists for generations were being celebrated in American universities as a new and creative art form. This pattern, traditional African knowledge being discovered and credited to Western innovators, is a recurring dynamic in the history of culture and commerce. Understanding this history is not to discourage creativity but to acknowledge the actual human history of ideas and techniques with the respect that the original knowledge holders deserve. The hibiscus, Hibiscus sabdorifer, called zobo in Nigeria, Roselle internationally, is one of Nigeria's most important plant resources, used for the refreshing red drink zobo that is ubiquitous across Nigeria. The same plant also produces one of the most accessible and beautiful natural dyes. The dried chalices, boiled in water, release a brilliant red-pink wine pigment that bonds to natural fibers. Unlike commercial synthetic dyes, which require chemical mordants and produce permanent results, hibiscus dye is semi-permanent. It will fade with washing and light exposure. For school demonstration purposes, this impermanence is acceptable. For traditional Adaya, indigo is preferred because indigo-specific chemistry creates a permanent bond with cotton, which is why centuries-old Adaya cloth retains its color. The contrast between hibiscus, beautiful, accessible, temporary, and indigo, technically demanding, historically significant, permanent, is itself a lesson in material science and the relationship between accessibility and permanence in dyeing. The intersection of pattern design theory and tie-dye practice demonstrates a principle central to design education. Understanding the underlying structure of a visual outcome allows you to plan for that outcome rather than simply hoping for it. The student who understands that accordion folding creates stripe patterns, that triangular folding creates diamond patterns, that tying points create circles, the student can plan their binding sequence to achieve a specific intended design. The student who just ties randomly and hopes will sometimes get beautiful results accidentally, but cannot reliably reproduce them or develop more complex designs. Design education is about converting accidents into intention, giving the artist the knowledge to execute what they envision, not just what happens to emerge from the process. For your exam, pattern equals systematic repetition of a motif. Motif equals the individual unit. Repeat types: straight/grid, half drop, brick, mirror. Symmetry types: translation, slide, rotation, turn, reflection, mirror. Tie-dye equals resist dyeing technique in which cloth is tied/folded before dyeing. Tied areas resist the dye, stay lighter, untied areas absorb the dye, darker. Nigerian tradition: Adaya oniko, Yoruba, raffia or thread binding, indigo dye, circular resist patterns, Abeokuta and Ibadan. For techniques: binding/oniko, tie cloth into peaks, create circles/ovals, accordion fold, regular back and forth folds plus binding, create stripes, triangular fold, folded corner to corner plus corner dipped, create diamond/stars, scrunching, random bunching plus binding, create organic irregular patterns. Process: pre-wash cloth, tie-dye, bath, rinse, before untying, untie, reveal, final rinse, dry. Materials: white cotton, rubber band/thread, fabric dye or natural dye. Natural alternative: hibiscus, zobo, flowers equals red pink dye. Exam tip: for state the result each technique produces, practice linking technique name directly to result, binding creates circles, accordion folding creates stripes, triangular folding creates diamond/star patterns, scrunching creates irregular organic patterns. Magnificent! You have completed JSS 1 Fine Art Term 2, building on the foundations of Term 1 with practical skills in lettering, watercolor, printing, clay sculpture, weaving, and textile design. You now have a rich toolkit of visual art techniques connected to Nigeria's extraordinary creative heritage. Term 3 takes us deeper into Nigerian art history, photography, poster design, and careers in fine art, and concludes with preparation for your class exhibition. See you next term.